All right, it's 9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to Delta Sigma Pi's presentation on planning for your effective transitions. My name is Chelsea Fix and I'm an educational and leadership consultant. I'll be presenting today's session along with another educational and leadership consultant, Jasmine Flores. But with me on this call, we also have Tyler Havens, the Associate Director of Chapter Services. The Chapter Services team is excited to share some tips and best practices with you all on transitions. And today we'll be covering everything you need to know for conducting your upcoming transitions. This presentation will be recorded for your reference and will be made available once all programs have been completed. Feel free to turn your cameras on and put your name, chapter, and email in the chat box to connect after the event. And I'll let Jasmine talk a little bit more about the agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you. Today we will be discussing all the things that you need to know in order to have effective officer transitions. We will cover some things that you should consider prior to having the officer transitions, then go into how to prepare for said transitions, what to cover during the official transition meeting, and what should be transitioned. You will be hearing the word transitioned a lot today. We also want to review CMP items that are related and connected to the officer transitions. We even have a couple hub tips, and of course we want to share additional tips and resources to help you feel confident in executing your chapter's officer transitions. If you have any questions throughout the program, please feel free to add them to the chat. We're happy to answer them as we go, or we will have time at the end of today's webinar to answer any of the questions that you have or you want to be answered tonight. Please feel free to also screenshot any of the slides that we have up to use for future reference.
Great. So I'm going to start talking about things to consider. But honestly, before you can start thinking about things to consider for your officer, before you start thinking about those officer transitions, you'll first need to consider when officer nominations and elections should be held. So would it be better for your chapter to conduct officer nominations in the middle to end of the term to allow for more time to transition? Or would you prefer to wait until the absolute end of the term, until after your initiation ceremony has taken place, so that pledges can also be nominated for positions as well? Or at that time, new initiates can be nominated for positions. So think about when your final exams are going to be, if your chapter meetings are bi-weekly, if you have an end of the term chapter celebration, if you want a special meeting for your nominations. So what does that timeline really look like? Ultimately, you should give yourself 3 weeks prior to the end of the term to host a meeting for nominations, a meeting for elections, and a meeting for transitions. And you can view the conducting virtual elections best practices through the Delta Sig 101 page on the website. And you should be able to find that relatively easy if you just type it into the search bar. You should also create a transition template to ensure all transitions are consistent. So this would be like a format for officers to use when they're thinking about things to consider when transitioning from term to term or year to year in some cases. Past officers can also include to do things that they should be doing right now, tips, suggestions, and other things that they've learned in their role in this template. So you can lay it out fairly simply. And you should also let brothers know what the specific positions entail. So what are the duties listed there? And you can review your officer duties in your chapter bylaws to kind of get a better view of that. And of course, also let brothers know what the qualifications are for those positions. What are their officer terms? Is it semester? Is it term? Is it for a full year? What does that look like? And then also when elections will take place, and finally, when that transition is finally going to be held. So I'm going to let Jasmine talk a little bit more about how to conduct that transition meeting.
Yeah, so the officers will need to decide how many meetings are necessary to effectively transition all the information and materials, whether it's an entire day of officer transitions or whether you split them up into different sections. Having a meeting with both the outgoing and incoming officers, a meeting with the individual officers, presidents, VP, COs, SVPs down the line of officers, and then coming to first executive committee meeting of the new officers. An additional meeting to kind of think about planning is a meeting with the president, VP finance, chapter advisor, in order to discuss the transition of the bank account, whether if it's on your campus or if it's an off-campus bank account. After these individual meetings are held, the new executive committee can again review the officer duties and discuss like, what are my duties? What are different things that maybe we didn't know of that we want to execute this term? And then you could begin planning those strategic plans as a group. Officers were able to hear what past officers had the time or the ability to complete and accomplish. So then the current officer is able to kind of strategically plan their upcoming events, their goals. Remember to share your goals as an executive team to the rest of the chapter, because they're the ones that are going to be holding you accountable and also asking the questions and obviously attending the events. Also, don't be afraid to have midterm review on set goals. Like if you have that set plan, look at them at the beginning of every month, at the end of the month. We also have a recorded webinar on our website where one of our volunteers has discussed strategic planning. So kind of what Chelsea said, if you go to Delta Sig 101 and look up the strategic planning, setting goals for operational purposes, that would be a great resource. And please also remember to invite your district director or your chapter advisor to these meetings, as they have insight of the chapter and can provide further assistance. They can also provide tips of, hey, like, don't forget these items that maybe the executive committee might forget. During these meetings, as each officer is filling out their strategic plan, the officers can brainstorm new ideas and activities for all chapter areas. The officers can also set preliminary dates for activities on the calendar. I'm pretty visual. I want all, my planner in front of me. At the same time, remember to check your institution's calendar, look at any fall breaks, look at holidays, homecoming, dates of midterms, finals. If you're also able to find, club organization fair dates, kind of look at your recruitment schedule, your pledge education program, that would be very beneficial. If your chapter also receives funding, have those funding deadlines on your calendars. So when discussing funding, be sure to also transition that information, whether it's, you receive funding for the institution, maybe it's from the college or school of business, but be sure to also take into consideration these budgets when making individual budgets for the officers. Another thing to take in consideration for the budgets is recruitment costs, event costs, if any. So have those conversations. If there's specific costs that your chapter has incurred in the past, whether it's reserving rooms, different institutions have different rules. Any invoices, be sure to be aware of when dues are due, obviously. Be sure to be aware of the regalia fee, invoice for the Grand Chapter Congress travel fund fee. Remember that a special meeting of the Grand Chapter will be in July of 2022. And then you have Grand Chapter Congress in 2023. So it's never too early to start planning for those things and begin budgeting, so it doesn't come to the term prior and you are, scrambling and trying to raise for those events. Talking about finances, so many things. You can view past financial forms on the hub under the forms tab, in specific, the completed forms tab. You could go back all the way to 2012 and see what the chapter officers have planned in the past and maybe incorporate different ideas into your plans for this incoming semester. You can also find the financial forms. If you are like, I don't know what we used to budget for, can we look at financial forms of the past? Yes, you can. So during this time, also officers can give a quick hub tutorial. I guess you could call it a quick review of where to find things. And I guess we'll show a little bit of that. One of the questions I also ask is, do the new officers have access to the hub? Have they created their username, password? Go into a little bit of my favorite things within our hub in the next slide. So we wanted to provide a quick snapshot of how your calendar should look like once you add events to it. This example before us is a screenshot of the month of October, and it has a couple dates in November. As you can see, there are blurred, I guess, events. November 7th, Founders Day, same day every single year. You also see it, an event 2 weeks prior to it. The last Saturday of October is Make a Difference Day. For example, this is a great opportunity for your chapter to host a community service event around or on this day to receive credit for participating in a national service project. So kind of, like I said, outline your dates, add your recruitment dates, add, I believe you added on here, chapter meeting dates, risk management event, DEI event, pretty much everything in order to assist your officers with organizations. You could also add screenshots of this to chapter meeting minutes or just any communications that you provide to the chapter. Going on a little bit more. So this is a screenshot of the dashboard. So it's on the left-hand side, it's the blue clipboard. It is important to show the officers what they could find on the hub. Think about your time as an officer and what took you a little bit longer to find. What do you wish you knew about the hub? On this page, one of my favorite things to notice is the website, social media links, making sure those links are not broken in any way. So if, you know, a student is looking at our dsp.org and they click on your chapter and they try to click on your website and it's broken, well, that's kind of, you know, the end of the line for them. On this profile, you could also find, like I said, the financial forms, or not the financial forms, excuse me, the chapter bylaws, policy procedures, the most up-to-date approved documents are on here. You can also see when your chapter was installed, term dates, and the most, like I said, most recent copy of bylaws, policy procedure. Now let's take a look at further the next tab, which is the finance one. This is very critical for your VP finance. We always get questions in regards to the tax ID. That is the first line on the screenshot. Here you can also see the invoices, past invoices of this academic year. This is where VP finance would also pay the invoices that were made. It's a pretty interesting, I believe it's a pretty interesting tab. Like I said, the last financial forms are also on this page. Now to go into a little bit more of our other tabs, I'll pass it on to Chelsea.
Awesome, thank you. So when your vice president of pledge education is transitioning to the next person who's going to serve in that role, they'll need to know how to find this page. And as you can see, it's that third page on the hub dashboard. So here they can view the chapter's approved pledge education program once that's approved. Here they can also find their badge and crown and delta inventory. So you want to make sure that's up to date as well. And now I think we're going to move back kind of into finances, talking about the chapter leadership fund. Awesome. So of course, it's kind of detailed here briefly what the chapter leadership fund is and what it does. So all officers should know how to find this chapter leadership fund link as well, because that shows you how to find the balance. You know, how much money does my chapter leadership fund account have? And for those of you who aren't familiar with your chapter leadership fund, that's a great tax deductible way to earn money for attending national events as a reimbursement, of course. But then it's also, there are other educational purposes that this money can be used for. So definitely make sure that you let the next set of officers know where to find this, because this can be very helpful for you. All right, so when it's time to transition, you'll need to think about all of the different things. There's so many things to consider. So all chapter inventory and which items are in whose possession. Think about who has what really. So things like ritual books, the gavel, badges, pledge pins, giant letters. I know a lot of chapters have those, or other memorabilia. All of that must be passed on to the next officer team. So you should also share any knowledge of where the chapter charter is located and where the scholarship key plaque is located. As Jasmine noted earlier, don't forget to transition all of your bank account information as well. So if you need to change signature names on the institution's bank account or another type of account, be sure to do so in a timely fashion so that everything is secure. Double check to make sure that all of the names are up to date before anyone leaves or graduates. Otherwise, you could have some serious issues later with paying anything that you need to pay. So you'll additionally need to ensure that all dues collection methods have been updated as well to reflect the current account information, and any social media information should also be passed along. So like Jasmine said earlier with your website, if you've got someone who's got admin privileges or admin access to any of your social media accounts or website, those officers are definitely going to need to pass that information along. And also, if there are any keys to any campus spaces like a locker or a room or anything like that, those need to be handed over as well. All right, so continuing on, there are a few other items and pieces of information to transition over. So make sure to share with the next set of officers how to request ritual regalia. So to do this, all they really need to do is fill out a form on the hub, and they can find that under the forms tab. But definitely let them know that that will have to be done in a timely manner next semester. So also let them know about any campus offices that your chapter interacts with. So the Office of Student Activities or Fraternity and Sorority Life, whichever one you interact with most closely or whichever one your chapter kind of falls under. It may be, you may also be in communication with like the accounting office, especially if your bank account's on campus, or if there are specific individuals within the College of Business, like an administrative assistant that you need to talk with to promote yourselves during recruitment, if you need to get them to send out flyers, or if you have them reserve rooms or anything like that, those individuals' contact information should be passed along, in addition to the dean's office or the dean's information. These stakeholders likely have the resources also to help you as a chapter, and they probably have some different resources that you've never thought of that you can utilize throughout your term or throughout your year. And they may also know how to help you plan your risk management or DEI event, kind of like what Jasmine was saying earlier. So if there are other specific places or services the chapter can take advantage of on campus, be sure to note those in transition documents as well. It's important to also write down how to reserve a room, how to reserve a table, or how to reserve specific equipment. Additionally, some universities may have like stricter funding processes. So if you've got directions on ways to apply for funding, like Jasmine said earlier, definitely keep any funding information in your transitioning documents. Also note any processes your chapter will need to go through to be recognized as a student organization on campus. And finally, if your chapter keeps an alumni database, because I know some chapters do that, make sure your VPAR transitions this information as well. And as they are making any updates, let us know too. We always like to make sure that our records are as up to date as possible and that we can adjust them accordingly if we need to. So I'll let Jasmine go back into the chapter management program items a little further.
Yeah, so here are some items within our chapter management program to consider when transitioning. You'll need to update all officer information in the hub within 7 days of elections. However, the final deadline for the officer report is stated in the hub for your specific chapter, which is 14 days after spring commencement. But if you could get that report done and submitted after elections, that'd be great. On the side, we cover on the left-hand side, we cover items that should be completed by outgoing officers, and will provide the incoming officers some training, whether it's VP Finance goes through the budget financial statements, the annual financial review to receive a little bit of training of this is how we collect, dues or all the processes. Kind of the same with VP Scholarship and Awards. They should be the ones submitting the awards. However, this could be a learning process for all the officers, not just the outgoing person. The new CMP year does begin on July 1, and it's, never too late to start thinking about what are we going to accomplish next year, but, making sure you have everything completed for this year. But on the right-hand side here, there are some items to think about early fall, end of the summer, whether it is that officer report that is due at least 14 days after the start of the term. Dues is the same every semester. They're within 30 days of the beginning of your chapter's term. Bylaws, policies, and procedures submission. Suggested deadline is October 1. However, the final deadline is June 15. So if your chapter has not submitted or resubmitted those documents, also an item to complete this spring. And one that is commonly missed, unfortunately, is nominating Chapter Collegian of the Year, which is under the chapter recognition tier. That is just a simple nomination of a brother that you believe has gone above and beyond for your chapter. Yeah, to go into a couple more tips, we'll give you all the tips and recommendations. Chelsea?
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about some of the different tips to think about specifically when transitioning. So you'll want to think about any pre-pandemic operations. As Jasmine said earlier, you have those forms on campus that you have those forms through the hub that you can look at. But you'll also need to think about food on campus. If there's a way to get food, if that's even within your campus, if that's allowed on your campus at that time. So food and campus spaces, chapter meeting procedures, and what that kind of looks like in person. But yeah, if you need to go back to those forms, like we were saying earlier, you absolutely can. That would be a great place for you to look if you're ever confused, like, hey, what did we do for professional events before? What did we do for alumni events before? What did those look like in person? You can see them from fall 2019, which is, of course, the last full in-person semester. But as you transition, you'll also want to have a goal setting session, like Jasmine said, with your executive committee. And everyone should feel invested in that goal setting process, as it takes more than just the officer team to achieve those goals. And I know you've all heard this a lot when establishing new goals, but they should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time specific. So when assigning specific tasks to officers, be sure to delegate as well and follow up as much as you can. Don't just, set a goal and say, hey, you do this, or have a specific officer who's assigned a specific task. Don't assume that they'll always complete it. Definitely follow up with them and make sure the task is completed so that you're one step closer to reaching your goal. Another tip for officers preparing for future transitions is to take about 15 minutes a week to record kind of what you've learned in that week. And you can utilize these questions to help with that thought process. So write down these specific questions and answer them for sure, but make sure they're detailed when you write them out. All right, so when transitioning, you'll find vital information in the CMP guide, individual discipline policy, and standard pledge education program. Officers should also stay updated on campus and local guidelines surrounding gathering limits. Additionally, some chapters may be receiving a consulting visit in the 2021 to 2022 academic year. Every chapter at some point receives a routine visit once every 2 years. And these visits are really to help and support the chapter in whatever way we can, with general operations, questions, checking in, see how everything's going. How can we provide recommendations to you to help you grow as a chapter? And honestly, while on visits, we've discovered that another tip during transitions is to store any information that's important digitally. So some examples of digital storage platforms are Google Drives, Dropboxes, Campus Digital Spaces, and the Hub Document Library. Just don't forget to transition the passwords to these systems as well. And you can look in your ritual book for the officer installation ceremony too. This makes the officer transition experience a lot more valuable as you have that official ceremony to kind of go along with it. So don't forget about that. And next, we're going to review our resources. So here are a few resources to remember when preparing for and planning for your officer transitions. And I'll let Jasmine go into a little more background on some of these.
Yeah, so kind of what we said, the individual officer pages, if you look up any position on the website, you'll find resources. We have the officer modules. Like as we stated, CMP guide, if you want to know exactly what to submit, when to submit, who needs to submit it, CMP guide is your go-to resource. The individual discipline policy. Local, national policies, procedures, and bylaws. Seeing the template and seeing like, oh, do our documents reflect the template? Are we, following the correct items? The pledge education guides. Fraternity operations page is a great resource as well. And Delta State University, I know we alluded to it a couple times. Different webinars that have been recorded this year are on the Delta State University platform. And one of the things I always talk about is once the new officers are elected and submitted through the officer report, you get an email. You get an email saying, congratulations into your role. Here are the list of resources. And I think alluding to that or saying, hey, like go back and see what was on the email. We send a lot of emails and hoping that you guys view them and utilize those as a resource. And I guess, honestly, the last resource we're here, Central Office staff, chapter service team, is happy to have any conversations if you guys want to set up 45-minute EC calls. We're happy to do that now and anytime in the future. If you want to have a goal setting meeting over the summer, let us know. Send us an email to consultants@dsp.org, and I'm sure one of us can connect with you. If there's a specific officer that has questions about events, happy to do that as well. Yeah, I guess wrapping that up, would love to open the floor to any questions that anyone has at this time. Is there anything that came to the wondering or having a question that potentially we did not answer? Please feel free, if you don't want to unmute yourself, send it through the chat function. Happy to read those aloud as well.
If you'd like to share anything special that you think your chapter does with transitions that you think would be beneficial for other officers, now would also be the time to do that as well.
All right, I'll start off with one. Chelsea, I am the VP Community Service, but I don't have access to the hub. Why can't I submit my community service event that I had last month?
Well, you just got elected into your position, right, Jasmine?
No, I'm helping the new person come into the position. So I can't submit it anymore. Why not?
Because the other person has now officially been listed in the hub as the VP of Community Service. So you no longer have access to submit that form at all. So they are the only one who has access now to submit that form. You no longer can do that because you're not listed as an officer in the hub anymore.
How are they able to resubmit this event?
So in order to do that, they would need to go to the forms tab and see that community service event, and they can click on it and review the comments and change the submission to whatever the comments say. If it's eligible for resubmission, that is. If it's not eligible and it doesn't meet the event criteria, then unfortunately it won't count for the semester and you may want to try another event.
I give that example. We've been asked that question in the past. Any other questions that we're able to answer though.
I do have a quick question. Hi, everyone. I am from the Untitled Chapter at the University of Texas at Arlington. So my campus for the fall, we are planning on having majority of the classes in person. And so some people in my chapter think we should hold in-person meetings, while other people are supporting the idea of virtual meetings. What would you recommend us go as? How would we handle the meetings?
I think if, some members are still hesitant on if they want to meet in person at that time, which is completely understandable, you could absolutely still hold in-person meetings, but then also do Zoom, like have those other members who aren't as comfortable being in person yet on Zoom as well. Just remember that you can't live stream ritual in any fashion. So keep that in mind as we go, but I think definitely you'll want to keep those members in mind and try to just cater to them as much as you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I see Caitlin raised her hand. Go for it, Caitlin.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my university's been in person strangely this whole time for the most part, minus last year. So we have started doing that though, where we'll have meeting in person, and then we will have a Zoom option, and then we turn it off during any ritual part. And we've had pretty good success with that, hinting that we have a conversation with the person about why they're on Zoom and it's not used as I don't want to participate. So I think as long as you have conversations with those brothers, it's worked for us. As long as you set that precedent of what the expectations are for etiquette if they're going to come via Zoom. I have a quick clarification question, I guess. You were talking about all the meetings that we should have with like officers and things. I'm going to be the outgoing president. Is it necessary for me to meet with all of the new exec one-on-one, or just meet with the new president one-on-one and have them meet one-on-one with each of their exec, or what is the best way for me to go about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was part of my presentation part in the webinar. You can have a meeting with the outgoing and incoming officers and just have that conversation as a group to start off with, and then maybe you could branch off and have the conversation with the incoming president, and then let them kind of take the reins after that. Yeah, like what we recommended. I think it's up to you guys to have the discussion of how much information, how much transitioning do we need to pass on to be successful. That's one of the biggest things that we want to bring up to you all, as things are changing, they're consistently changing, and I think having those conversations of what to expect, maybe obviously still kind of understanding the guidelines for meetings. Maybe you have a larger chapter and the institution states no more than 25 people are able to gather. You need to have those backup plans in regards to recruitment, kind of the question that you all stated, your chapter meetings, and just wanting to continue to follow guidelines, but at the same time do what you can to in a way go back to the next normal.
I have another question that just came to mind. I've heard this in the past and something I just never really thought of. You were talking about passing on passwords. Do you have any recommendations on the best way to go about doing that in a way that's protected? I don't know how I feel about just having passwords out in like a bunch of like Word docs. Okay. I didn't really know where to go for password managers. Thank you.
Travis, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's something I honestly hadn't heard of.
Yeah, so I actually use password managers in my work. I work in IT. And the cool thing about password managers like LastPass is you can actually share passwords in a secure encrypted vault. So, and actually turn on two-factor authentication so you can make sure that everything's safe, especially bank account information. And if you ever needed to share a password with someone temporarily, they can actually, if they also have a LastPass account, they can log in but never see the password. which is a really cool way to actually be able to keep your passwords secret and secure, but still give people access to accounts. If you go to LastPass.com, they have a lot of greatest things. So two-factor authentication, by the way, if you don't know what that is, if you ever get a PIN code that's sent to your cell phone after you log in, it's a way that even if someone steals your password, they can't get into your account because they need to have your cell phone or something that really proves that you are you. So if you ever need to know about that, there's also authentication apps. So if you ever want to chat about it and chat about technology, I'll put in my email address and we can talk about security. I think that's one thing that a lot of chapters don't think about is cybersecurity, because we can all get hacked or phished.
Definitely.
And-
Thank you so much for sharing that, Travis. We appreciate it. All right, Adam, I saw that you had your hand raised. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Adam Kavanaugh here, president of New Sigma. My question is really about the role of volunteer leaders in the transition. And for my chapter, we're on guidance currently, and we've been really having a successful transition, improving internal processes. So I really definitely want to engage our DD in those conversations for the officer transitions so that everyone's learning the new way of doing things, but I don't want to overwhelm the DD. So is there any best practices there about when to loop in the DD?
I think honestly, having your district director just be present in that meeting, and that way they can share any helpful insight that they can provide, or if there are specific things that they can chime in on. Like if they hear you talking about something like trials, for example, they can kind of chime in on that and say, oh, well, I know a little bit more about this, or they may be able to provide some more chapter history if they've been with your chapter for a while. So really just having them present, I think to be there with the conversation can be really beneficial in itself, but ultimately having your officers do the transition and them sitting in on it can be really beneficial. Does that make sense, Adam?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Chelsea.
You're welcome. Stacy, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, there's a few DDs on the call, Chelsea. So for me, as a person, when I attended, first, let the DD know that you are having a transition meeting first thing, because a lot of times we are not looped in that respect. And so the transitions meetings that I provide, again, historical context, but also if someone has a question of if you can't log on to the hub, who to contact, if there is, letting people know about the officer packs, right? And just basically giving an explanation of what is the role of the district director. Because again, if there haven't been an officer, they may not see the interaction, explain how much interaction that the DD has with the chapter and the executive committee.
Thank you for that, Stacy. I really appreciate that, and for providing your insight and your input. That means a lot. Going back to something that's kind of been brought up at this point, and Jasmine, I saw you unmuted. I'm sorry. I know we've been kind of talking about logging into the hub too. One thing I do want to throw out there for all of you to keep in mind, there is a difference between logging into the website and logging into the hub. So make sure that if you're an officer or you've got officers who are transitioning who have never created an account on the website, they're going to need to do that before they just get into the hub. So even if they've been listed as an officer in the hub, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be able to get into the hub right away, because you have to create an account on the website. And then once you do that, you'll be able to log in, and then you'll see something that says log into the hub. Go for it, Jasmine.
Yeah, I was also going to add a little bit within like district directors or just your volunteers within the transition process. They could also hold you accountable. You discuss these things at the end of the spring term. Where are you at with this now? They could also hold you accountable within your goal settings. I'm a big person in that component, so.
Yeah, you definitely want to have them present at the goal setting part of the meeting for sure. I see some stuff in here about reports too in the chat. You should also like transition that part of the hub as well. Transition that reports tab, because that's got, of course, your alumni radius report, which has all of the alumni within 25 miles of the university that your chapter may want to contact, and different things like that, faculty initiates. So definitely utilize that. Does anyone have any other questions? Or anything else you want to share? Okay. Well, I think that pretty much concludes our presentation for the night. If you need absolutely anything from us, feel free to reach out to hub@dsp.org, consultants@dsp.org, or either Jasmine or myself. We're always happy to answer any questions you have. And like Jasmine said, attend a strategic planning session with your executive committee. We're happy to do that as well. But I hope you all have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great presentation.